Hey guys, Sean here. Welcome to the F1 Word into a roundup of the final day of the first pre-season test. Now, yesterday there was no roundup because, as I'm sure you know, day 3 was a complete and total washout. Snow in the morning, heavy rain in the afternoon, freezing temperatures all day, and the team's got no meaningful running done whatsoever. For what it's worth, Fernando Alonso did top the session with the only time of the day. He did 11 laps as well. However, the other 4 drivers that went out racked up a grand total of 6 installation laps between them. There was a motion put forward by some teams to extend the first test to Friday, possibly run on Sunday, or at least start the second test next week a day earlier. However, 2 teams blocked that motion. I don't know who those teams are. I could probably take an educated guess, but I'm not going to get into that one just now. Let's move on to today then, and despite a wet start to the session, the conditions did improve, temperatures began to rise, and the majority of the teams more than made up for the lack of running yesterday. It was Lewis Hamilton then who topped the timesheets for the final day on a 1:19.333, a very ominous time on the medium tyres and completed just over a Grand Prix distance. Stoffel Vandoorne was half a second further back on the hyper soft tyres. He completed 110 laps, which turned out to be a really good return for McLaren after a frustrating start to testing. Sebastian Vettel rounded out the top 3 with 120 laps and a lap time that was nearly a second slower than the Mercedes. Yes, as ever, we cannot really pay too much attention to the lap times, and the first test is usually all about mileage, but that may well raise some concerns at Ferrari. We will see next week. Kevin Magnussen had a really good day for Haas, actually 96 laps on the board and finished up in 4th place. Fernando Alonso got a few hours in the afternoon. He managed 51 laps. Carlos Sainz finished up 6th and racked up 60 laps, with Lance Stroll having a much better day for Williams. He ended up 7th with 54 laps. I don't know if there'll be concern down at Force India and Red Bull, but 65 laps for Sergio Perez and just 35 for Max Verstappen has really left both teams with a lot of work to do next week. Pierre Gasly, 147 laps for Toro Rosso. Nico Hülkenberg put in 49 laps this morning. Bottas managed 60 for Mercedes. Charles Leclerc ended up in 15th place for Sauber with 59 laps on the board, 20 more than his teammate, and a lap time that was a second quicker. However, to be fair, conditions were better in the afternoon than they were in the morning, and Sergei Sorokin there, he ends up 15th and last on a 1:31.979 on the intermediate tyres, so we can read nothing into that whatsoever, and 47 laps on the board. For what it's worth, we will have a look at the 5 fastest lap times from this week. It is Lewis Hamilton top, 0.3 quicker than Sebastian Vettel. He ran on the medium tyres as well, versus Vettel on the softs. Stoffel Vandoorne ended up in 3rd place, just a couple of tenths further back. Valtteri Bottas a 10th back on that in 4th place. And Daniel Ricciardo, his time from day 1, sees him with the 5th fastest time of the week. However, as I have been saying all week, the first test is pretty much all about mileage, and one team is going to be very, very happy with what they've done, and that is Toro Rosso with 324 laps so far, and that is just 101 fewer than Honda managed through the whole of pre-season testing last year. A brilliant start for them. Mercedes have racked up 306 laps, which is 8 more than Ferrari. Sauber, they've had a really good start as well with 283 laps under their belt. They're going to be really happy with that. And I think Williams will be pleased with 277 as well. Renault there have completed 273, and McLaren, that just highlights how well they've bounced back today with 260 laps. Red Bull have put just 209 laps on the board. Personally, I think they will be a little bit worried by that, but I think with the weather being the way it is, they've probably not lost out on too much information. But it is still so important to get those laps under your belt early. Haas 187, they've bounced back well today, just as McLaren have. But Force India have managed just 166 laps this week. There is a lot of work to do for some teams next week, that is for sure. A few talking points from today's session then, and Eric Boullier has confirmed that it was a bolt failure that cost the team on Tuesday. The bolt, which apparently costs around £2 according to McLaren, burned the back of the car to the point where they had to rebuild both the gearbox and the entire back end. So that is why we didn't really see much of them on day 2. They also explained why they've been running the Hypersoft, saying that the tyre models indicate that they were the best tyres to work with in the cold conditions, but we've seen a lot of teams running mediums as well, and apparently that is pretty much for the same reasons. But all in all, I think despite the time they lost on Tuesday, I think given what they did today, they'll be much happier with how the first week has gone. Red Bull, though, had a very disappointing day. As I said there, 35 laps on the board for Max Verstappen. They were running a comparison test between 2 different front wing specifications earlier today. but to me they didn't appear to be in any mad rush to get too much running done today. Whether that was always going to be part of the programme, or the track conditions weren't right, or even if there were any underlying issues with the car, I guess we will find out over the next couple of days. But any running they were doing in the afternoon was cut short after Max Verstappen ran off track at turn 12 and beached his Red Bull in the gravel. And that was pretty much the end of the day for them. That obviously brought out the red flag. A couple of other red flag incidents throughout the day. Marcus Ericsson spun out at turn 2 in the morning, and towards the end of the day, Lance Stroll ran off the track at turn 3. He did stop, but eventually got going under his own steam. So one of the shortest red flag periods I think we've ever seen in testing. I will say, actually, with that incident, there was some talk that it was Charles Leclerc, but according to the circuit, it was Lance Stroll. Some interesting stuff coming out of Toro Rosso as well today. They are claiming that Honda's current engine is close in performance to the Renault engine that the team were running last season. They are also confident that Honda will be able to close that gap by the middle of this coming season. We will see, of course, but if nothing else, they appear on the face of it to have nailed the reliability. And finally, after what has been a pretty miserable week weather-wise in Barcelona, Christian Horner has become the latest person from the F1 paddock to suggest the teams should be testing elsewhere in 2019. Quite a few people this week have been talking about going back to Bahrain as they did a few years ago, and certainly snow and rain would not be an issue whatsoever there. However, let's just remember that this doesn't happen every year in Barcelona. In fact, it's the first time it's snowed at the Circuit de Catalunya in over 10 years. And the last time that F1 was affected by the snow in Barcelona was back in 2003. However, we have seen in recent years that rain does affect things there. And when you look at the money that was wasted this week, particularly yesterday, to be honest, the teams may as well have gone to Bahrain. That is it from me for today. I will be back very soon with more content as ever. And don't forget to join us this Sunday at 6 p.m. UK time, where we will be talking a little bit more about this week's pre-season testing, next week's pre-season testing, and as ever, answering your questions throughout the stream. But in the meantime, you can follow me on social media. Links to all of those are in the description down below. But as ever, thank you for watching. I've been Sean. This has been the F1 Word. And until next time, goodbye.